Let's jump ahead because I know you can fill in so much about CK. So, we're going to jump to Toledo and then, you getting, the call for CKLW. Because, I'll tell you, I've done a couple of these now. I've done Walt Baby Love, which and I did Gary Burbank. But, everything was vague about time at CK, including me. It's hard to remember really specific things that are really super interesting, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I take it for granted or whatever. But I know you wrote a thing that I saw online, and it was like, wow, there's a lot of precise stuff about CK, which was great because, that's what I kind of wanted to do with this, is to give listeners who, were infatuated with the station and really loved it to know what was going on inside and how it was. And radio people, from that time who only heard about how it was, and that was almost always wrong. What they heard never actually was the way it was. I thought it'd be kind of good to just, this is the way it was from the people who were there. So let's jump to Ohio and to Toledo. Detroit is just up the road, and you get the call.
Well, I was working for a company that was, the radio station was owned by a meatpacking company. Never go to work for a radio station owned by a meatpacker. Anyway, I was working with a fellow by the name of Ed Bush. You may know Ed. He had a talk show for a long time. Very successful talent, good guy. And he was doing middays on this little radio station in Toledo because he had been fired by Paul Drew. So it would have been early 1967. Paul Drew was hired by RKO, which owned CKLW, but not the Drake organization. This is before the Drake organization by 6 months. Oh. So Paul Drew and Bill Drake had worked together at Wake in Atlanta. They knew each other well. Paul had kind of copied what he thought was a replication of the Drake format without getting into any violations. Mm-hmm. And he started in about March of 1967, and he started assembling a team. Ed Bush was one of those who got the hook. And so Ed came to work at my radio station in Toledo. And Ed said, geez, I know you're a rock and roll guy. Why don't you send a tape up to this guy, Paul Drew? I faked a tape in the production room. I made a rock and roll tape in the prod room, sent it up to Paul Drew. Never thought I'd ever hear back. I was out at the Ellington Aircraft Salvage Corporation, which is, I was flying a junk airplane. The fellow at the base said, Jim, you need to land that airplane right away. You got to call your wife. She says it's urgent. What's up? She said, Jim, she says, you won't believe what I just did. I said, what? She said, I picked up the phone, and this voice on the other end said, hi, this is Paul Drew calling for Jim Davis. And she said, yeah, and I'm the Easter Bunny, and hung up. I called Paul back, and he said, listen, I don't like your tape. He said, you sound phony. And I said, well, I am phony. I said, I faked it in the production room because we went middle of the road. I just wanted you to hear what I could do. He said, I don't care about that. He said, just do your regular show, send it up on the Greyhound bus. I'll meet it on the other end. This was Saturday evening. I was on the air. He called me on Sunday. He said, I'd like to have you in my office tomorrow morning. I was 2 hours early. The guard let me in. And at 8 o'clock, Rosalie Trombley came in. She was the switchboard operator, famous Rosalie, the girl with the golden ear, who I was honored to pay tribute to her recently in a nice little video. I think you've seen it. It's a great
video. Yeah.
So anyway, Rosalie and I became friends as I sat in the lobby. 2 hours went by. And Rosalie and I, by this time, I think we were playing mahjong. I don't know. We were certainly, we knew each other well. Paul, known for being kind of the white tornado, went through the lobby at the Herculean speeds and said, come with me, we're going to Detroit, over to East Grand Boulevard to the back door of what you know as the old Motown studios. Mm-hmm. And what occurred was almost like a drug deal. It was like the door opened, a person came out, there was a bag, and the bag came back into the car. And Paul said, you didn't see this occur. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're to tell no one about this. I said, okay. He said, I'm only telling you this because I assume you're coming to work for us. Whew. I remember those words to this day, Pat, like it was the most fabulous moment. I couldn't believe it. I was going to go work for the Big 8. So anyway, I said, what's in the bag? And he said, It's the acetate of the Supreme's new single. And he said, we have a 12-hour leap on it. He said, WKNR won't have this for 12 hours. So in those days, we used to whisper. We'd open up the mic and we go, CKLW exclusive.
Yeah.
And we did that for 12 hours until, of course, Keener went ballistic and they ultimately got a copy of the record. But that's the kind of detail that Paul would go to. Now, I would also tell you that during that period of time, the Drake organization had come on board. About 6 months into Paul's employment, RKO signed a group deal for them to consult all of the 7 owned and operated RKO General radio stations. So to put this in perspective, Paul came in the spring of 1967, and then about August or September of 67, Drake came in. So Paul stayed on with Drake, but all of a sudden things changed dramatically. It went from being Radio 8 CKLW to the Big 8 CKLW. Which is interesting. It's the only one of the RKO stations that didn't become Boss 8. All the rest of them were Boss Radio, but we were the Big 8.
Yeah. So did this is all new to me. I was there for like
well, the industry
15,
hated
20 years. Yeah. No, I know that, and we'll go into that. But just for clarity for me and probably for everybody else, Drew takes it. He lights the station up. The new thing is the format and what's going on and the way it sounds, other than Radio 8 and Big 8, is it roughly sort of the same, or?
I really never even knew that we were
correct.
We weren't Drake stations. We were Drew stations. I mean, it was like this guy dotted every I and crossed every T. I would say at that point he was despised in the radio industry, because think about this, all of these old personalities who'd been on the air forever on these radio stations were being displaced by card readers. They used to call us, all they ever do is read the cards. Well, yeah, we did read some cards, but you know what? There was a lot of content. People forget about that if you were good, you were allowed more and more content all the time.